everyone, welcome to Thursday Thought Leadership. On Thursday Thought Leaderships, I talk to amazing thought leaders in the field of baking. Today we have Arnaud Dubat. He is the Director for Customer Care at Chopin Technologies, which is a brand of KPM Analytics. Welcome, Arnaud.
Hello, everybody. Thank you. And thank you very much, Lynn, for giving me this opportunity to speak with you today.
Well, just to make sure that everybody know why you have an accent, you are actually calling in from France. That's so awesome. Which part of France are you calling in from?
I'm just nearby Paris, so I know it's evening for you and it's just early morning for me.
Yeah.
So I'm here with my coffee and ready for a new day.
All right. So for those people who don't know Chopin, Chopin makes an amazing line of rheological analytical tools. So Arnaud, tell us a little bit about yourself. Like, how did you end up in this field? Were you a serial scientist?
That's a nice question. So it takes me way back in my past. No, I was absolutely not aiming to work in a serial field. I started studying biochemistry, and then for some reason, I ended up studying in the French milling school in Paris. So here I was trained as a miller. I'm a miller.
Wow. Okay.
I never worked in a mill. The only mills I know are the laboratory mills, which is quite enough for me. And then I had the opportunity to join the company for working as a service technician. And then I had opportunities to do other things on sales applications a little bit. And while I was working, I completed my education with an engineering degree in food science and then a master in strategic marketing.
Interesting. So how long have you been at Chopin?
It's a little bit more than 30 years now.
Wow.
So in 1989.
Wow. So over the years, what developments have you seen in the quality rheological measurements in the field of grains and baking?
Another good question. It's a tricky one because at the same time we have seen innovation, we have seen modification, but at the same time it remains quite the same. If we look, basically we are still using the same tools, sometimes the same protocols as we were using, I don't know, 50, 60, 100 years ago. If you look at the lvograph,
I was just going to ask you, how did Chopin come about? I mean, what brought you into this field? What brought the name Chopin into this field?
So the name Chopin is a name of comes from the name of Marcel Chopin, and Marcel Chopin is the inventor of the alveograph, and so he based the company on this research. And the reason for him for developing such a machine was he was lacking a way of understanding what's happening with the flour. Why sometimes, because he was working in a mill at this time in the east of France, and he was a little bit wondering why sometimes the flour was doing good at the bakery and sometimes not good. So of course, at this time they were doing manual gluten or these kind of things, but that was not enough. So he said, okay, I need to have a way off. And his idea was to simulate a bubble which is kept in the bread. That's an alveole. And he said, if I can simulate what's happening to the alveole of the bread, then I will understand how the bread works. And that's, I mean, we are still living with this idea, and it's still a product that is very successful in many parts of the world. Of course, now we know that it does not give all the information, but it gives a lot of very interesting information.
So for those of the people out there who don't know what an alveograph is, can you explain what the actual machine
Yes,
do,
very,
what does it
very
measure?
Very rapidly. It's a machine that mixes a dough, a simple dough, with flour, water, and salt.
Mm-hmm.
No yeast in this one. And we are going to mix the dough in a certain way. We are going to extrude little patties, like laminating patties. We are going to cut like little cookies and let them rest a little bit so the gluten network can rest a little bit and make links. And then after we place that patty under a source of air, which will be blowing a bubble. And what we are going to measure is the first thing is the resistance of the dough to the blowing, which corresponds to the tenacity of the dough. And then we are going to measure the extensibility, the capacity of the bubble to keep gas and expand. So we see that some product, we need to have huge extensibility, otherwise it's less important. Mm-hmm. And the other things we are also measuring is the elasticity of the dough. So
okay, so let me summarize this for some of you out there who have never really seen this machine work before. It's amazing to me because I've seen it work a few times. It's like chewing a bubble gum and blowing a bubble gum and measuring how long it will take for the bubble gum to burst, right? That would be your quality parameter, right?
That's exactly that. That's exactly
right. That. But it's not bubble gum. It's actually measuring the quality of the wheat flour, right? Okay. So you can't just sell one machine, right? Nope. Like what else do you sell other than the alveograph?
Well, it's of course the companies, I was not there at this time, but the company started with this tool and they have been very successful to such an extent that at a certain point it was a little bit like Chopin is only the alveograph, which is not true, because if you want to have flour, you need to have mills to transform the wheat into flour. So that's where we developed a real expertise in laboratory milling also.
Oh,
so we
really?
have a range on that.
Okay.
We also have ways of measuring moisture that can be with oven or NIR. We can do this. And of course, since you start touching NIR, you're not only measuring moisture, you can measure protein, you can measure a lot of things. But then after, if we go back to the rheological part, there was one thing, and that was also invented by Marcel Chopin. He wanted to have a way of measuring the dough during proofing. So we have a system which is called the Rheo F4, which is measuring the dough during proofing, and then we can know the gas production, the gas retention, and the impact on the dough development. And one of the latest devices we added to the range was the Mixolab. And this is where, coming back to your first question, that's where we bring innovation to the market, because this tool is very unique. There is no other ones. And what we are doing with this tool, we are measuring the dough consistency during mixing. I mean, we are not the first one to do that. There are a lot of
the Mixolab. It's one of this century's best invention in rheological tools, okay? Because it takes the mixograph and the farintograph and the mylograph, is that correct? It's 3 instruments in one. That's just amazing. So yeah, let's go a little bit more into discussing who invented this? Like, who thought of this?
Here again, we need to make a little bit of history. The machine was invented originally by a miller from Netherlands, long time ago. And when I started working with Chopin and when I was traveling north of France and Belgium, a lot of people were asking me about curious machine they call the Petrinex. And this Petrinex, I ended up understanding it was built by a Belgian guy from his garage. And basically it was the concept of the Mixolab. But at this time we said, okay, let's see. And when was that? About 15 years ago, another guy from Belgium and a company called rheological, they took over the Petrinace and they tried to make it a little bit more modern, let's say. So we got interested into that. We said, okay, that's first of all, that's interesting. That could completely complement our range of products. So to make it short, we came to this company, which was a real small company, and we found an agreement to work with them and give more exposure to the product, have it standardized internationally, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what we did.
Interesting. Wow. So it's from a partnership and an acquisition of intellectual property that you came to the Mixolab.
Exactly.
Can anyone use this instead of the rheolograph? Like rheolograph seems to be like the standard in the milling industry.
That's definitely it, and particularly in some part of the world. If you look, the world is a little bit split in two. It's less and less true, but basically it is. You have all the Latin part, which is more from the alveograph, and the more Anglo-Saxon part, which is more pharinograph. That's how it came from the development of the two brands. With all respect to the pharinograph, it's clear that what we can see today, it's the Mixolab brings much more information. So yes, we can have the same kind of information as we do have with the pharinograph. But what we see today, it looks a little bit a pity to have this new tool that can make a lot of things and reduce it only to what we know and what is used today, and that's which doesn't give all satisfaction. So we can do what does a pharinograph. There is no doubt about that, but we can do way more.
Right.
You were mentioning that it's kind of a mylograph because it can heat up the dough, and so we can see starch gelatinization, retrogradation, etc. Very important.
Scaling, yes, absolutely. Yeah.
But the novelty is here we are not doing that on a slurry, which is the case of the amylograph. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah.
But we are doing that on the dough, and that changes everything.
Correct. So, for someone new who has not seen this instrument in action yet, what can a Mixolap do for them in terms of product development?
That's for product development. That's a really good tool because we have had, and I think that's the book you have in the end. That's what we did at the beginning about all the applications possible with the Mixolab.
This is the Mixolap graph for some people who can, yeah, this is pretty amazing right here. And you spit out the cobweb graph, which is really important in terms of properties. But I've also realized you spend a lot of resources just into developing a handbook, not just for wheat-based products, but for other products as well. We'll go into that later. But yeah, how would someone like who has a Mixolab use it for R&D, product development?
For R&D, the good thing with the Mixolab, and that's something we wanted from scratch when we started thinking this new product, we wanted to make a product as open as possible. So with the Mixolab, you can change the temperature profile, you can change the mixing speed, you can really create a profile that is really fitting your needs. Starting from that, you can analyze those samples from the line, for instance, directly. We have attachment for doing that.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, that's a great one because you can really follow the dough evolution from different points of the production line and better understand how it is stressed. But of course, you can work with developing complicated formulas. We have been working with people adding milk, adding eggs, sugars, enzymes, fibers, whatever. The good thing with the Mixolab that everything mixes. So you can still register something. Sometimes the more complicated the formula, sometimes the interpretation is more tricky, but you can always do that. And what we have been developing a lot with the Mixolab is also the support for users. We have a whole team of application specialists in Chopin, and they are just here for answering specific question or helping the people developing protocol if they are not sure. So we try to provide a lot of examples of what can be done. And if this is something specific, then we can still discuss together, and that's part of the service.
So for someone who is, say, developing a product for shelf life extension to make it longer, and they want to use something like an enzyme solution, how would they look at the Mixolab and say, well, this one will work or this solution won't work? Which part of the Mixolab graph will it indicate that?
So in that case, and we had this example. In that case, we are going to look at the end of the test, where we have in fact, we are cooling down the dough after heating up. So the starch has gelatinized. And so as we are cooling down, we are going to see the first moment of starch setback. And of course, we are not seeing the whole retrogradation process. It's just the beginning. But for some other measurement, we know that this part and the way this part is behaving is a good indicator of the speed of the shelf life.
Oh, interesting.
And then, so working on that, and for instance, we have been working a lot with maltogenic amylases, and we have seen a clear impact of this curve. In fact, if it's going up very rapidly, it means that the retrogradation is fast, and so the shelf life will be short.
Right.
And when you add these enzymes, you can see clearly the curves going down, and then the product shelf life is also longer. So that's a very clear impact and very interesting one. Yes.
That's amazing. And this is why, tools like that are so handy. And it cuts down, R&D time on shelf life studies. That's what I love about it.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I was also surprised that you can use gluten-free flours in these things. Can you explain? How does that work?
As I said, we can, since you can create a dough, you can measure everything. So of course, in gluten-free, it's kind of a difficult one, because there is no one kind of gluten-free. There are different kind of formulas. Some are more like doughs, other ones more like batters. So we are more looking at the dough ones, which are a little bit more easy for us. And then we mix that with other studies where we have studied different kind of let's say, I would not say cereals or pseudo cereals or other sorts of things that we have been working with quinoa, we have been working with corn, with rice, flour, with everything. And then since you can measure something when you mix them, then you can do something. We have also had a lot of help from researchers, because we are working with on partnership. And for instance, we have a partner in Spain, which is called IATA, with Dr. Cristina Molina-Rosell, and she has been intensively using the Mixolab for gluten-free formulation. So that's also where we got this information, because we are not specialists of every product.
That's really interesting. Have you ever seen a gluten-free Mixolab curve react the same way as a wheat Mixolab curve?
Currently, yes. There is one study. I cannot share all the details because that's a PhD thesis, and I think it will be presented very soon. But there is one PhD candidate working for London university, and that's his aim. That's his aim to do gluten-free dough, which has exactly the same characteristic as a standard dough. And yes, it works.
Oh, I would love to see that study. Please let me know when it comes out.
Yes, I have seen some results, and it's funny because he's also using hemp flour, which is quite unusual. So a lot of innovation in there.
Actually, that is really important because hemp flour is on the rise here in the US. It's gaining a lot of traction, you know, so it's important that we talk more about that when that's available. Okay, gluten-free is still a very, very strong trend here in the US, and a lot of bakers have gone into it, you know, pretty much because if you service the grocery store and you don't have a gluten-free product, you're not going to get more shelf space, you know. So it's just one of those things where it's going to strengthen in terms of the gluten-free market. It's going to go up quite a bit, you know, in the next few years. But yeah, I think this is excellent. Thank you for coming on to my Thought Leadership Thursday. Again, I love the book. Thank you for sharing it with me. I really go into details in such theory handbooks. So before I end, this is what I ask of all guests is, could you yourself share a leadership skill? Because you have been with this company for over 30 years. Share something with us, because this is amazing. This is a legacy company, you know?
Yeah, sure. So many things. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing is to be, let's say, to listen a lot to what you can hear, and do not come with already done-minded. We have a lot of things that we know that should work, but sometimes for some reason it cannot work. I have been very lucky, so I could travel all around the world, and I could see that some solutions which were working very well here, then you go to another side of the world and it doesn't work. So I think the key word is to stay humble. Even if you know a lot of things, you have to stay humble. And the second thing is to exchange information, to shake information, to confront information. I had one of my mentors when I entered the company. He was always telling me, if I have $1 and you have $1 and we give $1 to the other one, we still have $1.
Exactly.
If I have one idea and you have one idea and we start exchanging the idea, at least we end up, each one of us, with 2 ideas, and certainly maybe 3 or 4, because that will give us, and that's really what I wanted to develop, and that I'm developing with my teams. I have been very lucky to meet a lot of people that were giving me little seeds. Sometimes you don't understand that this is making a change, but maybe 1 year, 2 years after, then okay, something.
I've been there before. Yeah, absolutely. Listening is as important, if not more important, than talking.
Exactly. My mother always told me, you have one mouth and 2 ears, so it means that you should listen twice as you speak.
Exactly. Hey, I also follow you on Facebook, and I think that you have an amazing guitar playing skill.
Thank you.
Did you bring a guitar today?
I don't know if I will have time today, but
probably not. It has to be the next time. But but maybe next time you can play the guitar before we do our next session.
That would be. I don't know if you will have a lot of followers after that.
I would love to share your Game of Thrones rendition. That was just excellent. Excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, Arnaud. Thanks for dropping by, and I really appreciate you being here today.
Thank you, Lynn. That was a real pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.